All right, so now I'm going to talk about the Scooby-Doo project. The Scooby-Doo project is interesting in that it is probably the best parody of the Blair Witch project. Now, clearly I like animation. Obviously, I'm going to say that. But I'm going to tell you another thing. I was really into the Blair Witch. I actually got to see it at a preview before the limited release, and got really into it and watched all the specials and went to the website and all these things. The Scooby-Doo project is more of a representation of all of that as well as the movie. It's actually a fairly well-researched parody of the Blair Witch project. Now, parodies of the Blair Witch project were literally all the rage. Everybody did one. It was obnoxious. Like Sports Center, like everyone, SNL actually had a sketch where they like talked about how they weren't going to do one or they're going to make a better one or something. Like they literally, like Lorne Michaels and Cameron Diaz was there. That was not a great one, but a lot of people did one, and most lists I could see are places online where people made like online video sites of like the Blair Witch project with Disney princesses or something, like crap we still have on YouTube now. But even at the time, there were critical notices on how this was the best one. And I think what works about this is it's unexpected. You are mixing animation and live action, but as well as they are able to kind of do the lore of the Blair Witch project. Now, I think the specials and the lore, and that was kind of a big part of what made the Blair Witch project its sort of viral marketing campaign. And clearly they watched all of that stuff. And so if you watch what they do with the Scooby-Doo project, is they not only have the parody, is these things with the cops going through the tapes. That's not in the Blair Witch project, the movie. Those are from the specials and the website of them like showing the tapes they found and everything like that. And so they clearly like went really into the Blair Witch project and went through like everything and all the possibilities of the Blair Witch project, and kind of really understood it more so than just going like, let's have, Daphne or Velma go, I'm so scared, or run through the woods. Like they really got into the Blair Witch project, which I found interesting. Now, this was actually produced by William Street before there was kind of an Adult Swim. They make like Space Ghost and weird bumpers and things like that. We're asked in Atlanta to make bumpers for these Scooby-Doo marathons, and they would make kind of interesting stuff. So the Scooby-Doo project is sort of a pre-Adult Swim thing. You can kind of tell that by the monster. It looks very aquatine and stuff like that. They basically were installed to make this. They're going to have 3 different crews make it, but then they came together and said, hey, why don't we just make this cool Blair Witch thing that'll air during all of them? And that's what they did. Now, some of these people aren't the 3 people that made them. One of them, so Casper Kelly, would go on to work for William Street and help write Too Many Cooks, as well as helped write on Mandy with Nicolas Cage. Interesting guy. But they helped come up with this whole thing. They were actually kind of like making this on the fly, and the network really liked it. The 2 cops who I mentioned, that was shot in kind of a lunchroom during the day very quickly. The mystery machine they have in it, which is kind of live action, that's a real mystery machine that was on a promotional tour. They contacted the people who had the mystery machine and shot some footage with it, and then they sent it to them so they could keep doing stuff with it. They get all the voice actors at the time, because they couldn't get them to be in Atlanta. They had to have them do over the phone instructions, and they actually got Scott Enos, Frank Welker, Mary Kay Bergman, and BJ Ward to all do their voices, because they were all actually, I keep seeing that they were working on Scooby-Doo Zombie Island at the time, so it's kind of an interesting offshoot that they made this cool thing. And when they played it originally, they got such good press, they then made a special out of that. I prefer if you watch the bumper versions of it than the cut together one. The bumper version is longer and has more footage. And what I really like about this special is it kind of actually, I will say they really understood the Blair Witch project, because it's more about them sort of hanging out and being goofy, and it does actually get scary, and it works for what Scooby-Doo is. Scooby-Doo is like a horror type show. Like, I think people forget about that because it's sort of a kid's thing, but having them in a horror movie is like sort of a perfect fit. So like, obviously them, filming it and having Velma film it at this time and them yelling at her, it kind of goes beyond a normal Scooby-Doo thing. But it was kind of an interesting way to take it, because of course that they would get into a thing like this and then they have it more relate to cartoons, and it's very William Street Space Ghost kind of parody. I mean, you can kind of tell that obviously because they worked on it. But I really like what they did with that, because they get like most of the Blair Witch is like these people arguing with one another, like kids being goofy, things like that, and that's Scooby-Doo. So they definitely take advantage of that and get it to work within the whole thing. And they're still acting like Scooby-Doo characters while doing the Blair Witch thing. It's really ingenious, actually, and you should check it out on YouTube. I will have links in the description of both the links of the segment one and the special that would air. That one, the segment ones would air on 3 marathons in October of 1999, which also, interesting fact, was around the time that the Blair Witch Project came on home video. It was rushed out on home video to come out around Halloween of that year. It actually came out in July. They rushed it out early, which never happens, just so it could be out on VHS on Halloween, which is a bad decision, I will tell you, because a lot of kids watched that movie like with a huge group, and Blair Witch Project is not a Halloween party movie. I'm going to say that. It's a movie you watch by yourself with the lights off. It's not. So a lot of people ended up hating it after that Halloween. It didn't help it, to be honest with you. But Blair Witch was on everybody's mind, particularly that Halloween. So it was like the other peak time. And they were actually worried, because so many people had done Blair Witch parodies, that no one would like theirs. But theirs got such great reviews and everything that they ended up putting out a full special, the 10-minute special, I believe later in November of 1999. It would actually, in 2000, win an Annie Award for Outstanding Animated Special Program, which shows you how loved it was. Like, there's lots of good reviews from like everyone from Vanity Fair to, you know, Bloody Disgusting to Pace Magazine to things like that, to bring up how much they liked this parody. And people were fucking sick of Blair Witch parodies when it aired, which shows you how fucking good it is. But I think it was people who William Street, before they really broke out, people did like the Adult Swim vibe at that time, because it was mostly reruns and you have to come up with creative ways to repackage things, and William Street was genius at that. Between like Space Ghost and having like the animated cartoons with a laugh track and everything like this, and this is one of their high points. I know they'd later make another one later talking about Night of the Living Dead, but I thought I'd talk about this one because I've always really liked this special. And I think what I really wanted to bring up is how well it understood the Blair Witch Project and the phenomenon. And I think it understood that better than all the other parodies who sort of just went like, haha, whatever, get it, these characters in a Blair Witch scenario. They understood that, and they understood the phenomenon and all the other like expanded lore of Blair Witch that is in there as well, which is, even though it's a quick little thing, it's referencing something from those documentaries. I can tell you, I watched them. So it's just really a really smart parody, actually. And I think they did a good job with it. It's also, I think, the only Scooby-Doo thing where everyone's dead at the end. And apparently they did actually bring up this in, like, I think it was the big game Roadrunner vs. Coyote thing. And apparently Fred talked about it, and he revealed the other members. They escaped from the monster, and it was just a guy in the mask in the end and stuff like that. So this did come up later, that like they didn't actually get murdered, but whatever. I think this is probably the best Blair Witch parody. I'm sure none of you really remember the onslaught of Blair Witch parodies, but the fact that this still gets brought up, and I looked it up, and it's the only Blair Witch parody with as many reviews and as many articles written about it. And I think because it's such an interesting creative concept, it also shows you how smart William Street was, and having Chris Kelly there, who would eventually work on Too Many Cooks and countless other properties for Adult Swim and Mandy, shows you that clearly, like, these guys were like coming up and clearly very talented, and people were recognizing it. And it's just like a really funny special. And if you're a fan of Scooby-Doo, it's definitely an adult thing, but if you're a fan of Scooby-Doo, it's 100% worth a watch. And check out the Scooby-Doo Project, which will definitely go down as the best Blair Witch parody. I mean, it's a definitely better parody than that third movie, so...